that was my plan. And I think when I like let that go, there was such a relief. So it wasn't like I was just waiting for God to like come do a miracle. I still had to go back and rebuild, but I also had this sense of, if this is not where he wants me, he is not going to lead me here.
Welcome to Elevate the Podcast, a storytelling and business podcast where we interview and mastermind entrepreneurs in the agricultural, Western, and rural space.
On Elevate, we deep dive entrepreneur stories and share the problems they encountered and opportunities they created as a way to educate, inspire, and encourage the dreamer inside us all. We mastermind business ideas and deep dive topics to deliver tangible advice, useful tools, and bold strategies that we as entrepreneurs can implement to drive our own businesses forward.
Created by agriculture for agriculture, Elevate opens the doors for rural, Western, and agricultural entrepreneurs so they can elevate themselves, their businesses, and the lifestyles we all love. We are your hosts, Tara Vanderdusen and Natalie Kovarik, and today on the show we have Laura Benson, founder of the online boutique shop Filly Flair. Laura is a born and raised South Dakota farm girl who became an entrepreneur at a very young age. Over the last decade, Laura has spent a majority of her time building her online boutique, shop Filly Flair, into an 8-figure-a-year business while simultaneously raising kids on the farm with her husband.
I'm certain many of you listening can understand the feeling of possessing extreme love and passion for agriculture despite little monetary compensation for your time and efforts. This was the case for Laura Benson. Before spending years creating a huge online boutique, Laura was just a single gal helping her dad run their family farm of 1,000 head of cattle. She spent her days managing employees, herd health, and calf feeding. You could say her life was completely and utterly engulfed in agriculture. She even had her own YouTube channel called The Real Farm Girl, and she loved it. She loved all of it. But the downside was she was only making $30K a year, working 15 hours a day, all while knowing there wasn't a huge future potential for growing the operation. That's when she came up with a new idea to start a side gig, one that would hopefully help cover her expensive hobby of owning a horse and barrel racing.
I started Filly Flair just totally out of necessity, needing some more funds. And so when I was running my dad's operation, I loved it. I never imagined my life not on the farm. So it's really interesting where life has taken me. But just going back to managing an operation, we milked about 450 head of cattle. I had employees and doing herd health and cattle and all those things. But I loved it. It was 100% what engulfed me, but it did not provide a lot of income. And I had a very expensive hobby of having a horse. And so now that I'm older, I realize I am very much like a serial entrepreneur. My brain is always thinking of what is next. And when I was 21, 22, I didn't even know what that word meant, but my brain still operated that way. So I was always thinking, what can I do next? What is the next thing where I can, add to, at the time, honestly, just trying to make more money. And so when I would go to these barrel races where all my friends were, everyone was wearing the blingy belts and it was really popular. And I was like, gosh, if I could find those and sell them. And so I just kind of Googled my way through and found some of the wholesale sites and realized the popular stores like Rods were carrying them for twice what I could sell and still make a good margin. And I'm like, this is a win-win. All my barrel racing friends will be happy. I can make some extra cash. But I did know right away I wanted to set up a website. I immediately knew, I had no idea how to set up a website, but I knew that I wanted people to be able to shop, even if I wasn't at a barrel race. I knew that if I'm going to be doing this, I want to be able to hand someone a business card and say, you can shop this anytime. I can be working and you can still go to the website and shop what I have. So that was a necessity for me right out of the gate.
So how old were you when you started this?
22.
So were you still in college, or what else were you doing then? Were you just working on the...
I only went to a semester of college. I dropped out. I was paying for it myself. My parents have never had funds for any of us for college, which is fine. And I had no idea what I wanted to do. I hated it. I couldn't hardly afford it. And so then I worked a couple Eastman Feeds, a feed store. And then I worked for a different dairy farmer for a while. I was an ornery kid and my dad and I needed some space. And then when I started dating my husband, he was like, if you love dairy, you should be back with your dad. That just makes sense. So it took me a couple years to kind of come around and be back on the farm there.
So when you started your website, where were you at with that? Were you here's my website, or what all went into that building of that website?
Just to back up, I remember many mornings, we probably fed, 200 calves, and I'd be feeding calves trying to come up with catchy names. And then I would go to, Google and see if they were the domains were taken. So a lot of the process was what's catchy, sort of Western, and not taken. And so I literally remember doing that when I was feeding calves. And then no, I spent probably 2 to 3 months researching vendors, like where could I find product? I didn't have hardly any money. I actually pre-ordered some of the first stuff I had because I didn't have enough money like to stick into it. And so I didn't have internet like at my house. I would work from the office at the farm when I was done for the night. So I would stay in the office for a couple hours and work on this terrible like Zen cart website that was free. You couldn't even put in a size. You'd have to put it in the comments, but it was free. And so I set that all up, and then I ordered like my first batch and like, the whole thing, copied the pictures that I like from their site. They were terrible. And I ordered business cards. I don't know why, because I don't carry business cards anymore ever. But at the time I was like, I can hand these out to everyone and they can go to the website. So that was where I started. I didn't tell a soul until I had business cards and product and like launched kind of.
I have so many questions. I love that you say that though, because one of my favorite female entrepreneurs, Sarah Blakely, who's the founder of Spanx, she shares that same exact thing. She said that, and she actually offers that advice. She said that, don't share because people will try and talk you out of it. And usually it's just out of like love, right? Like not wanting to see you fail or crushed or anything like that. And so they'll kind of like ask you like, are you really sure you want to do this? And give you all the reasons why it won't work. And so she said she did the same thing. She held her idea really close to her until she was like, there's basically no backing out. And that way, when people's opinions would not sway me, like I would do it no matter what.
Yeah. And even I don't know if I'm a pretty strong-headed woman. So I feel like, I don't know if someone could have talked me out of it, but I think if I would have had more opinions, I think it becomes a lot easier to sway you from the path that you thought you were going to take. And then it makes the more, if you can't make them a decision, it's really hard to just get started. So I think that was probably it for me.
So is there a story behind the name, or was it just random?
There's not. I was trying to come up with something that was sort of catchy, that was somehow Western related. Filly is, of course, a female horse. I was just trying to come up with something that was catchy, a little bit Western, and easy to remember. And a funny story about the name is, so over the years, we have clearly evolved and shifted into much more of like a fast fashion. And we can talk about that in a little bit. But there was one point where I almost hated it because we had evolved so much. And I was like, boutiques were starting, it was before boutiques were kind of everywhere. And I was like, gosh, do I change my name? Because I don't feel like it's Western at all. And people thought we were like from Philadelphia. They didn't get it. And then when we had this huge rise of boutiques, it was so different and unique that I felt like it really helped us continue to stand out. It wasn't just like I named my kids, or, I mean, no offense to anybody that does, but that became very the norm. And so it was very, very different and catchy.
So as you're building this website, going to barrel races, selling, product, do you remember like your first sale?
Yes. I don't remember my first sale at a barrel race. I do remember my first sale online was from a lady in Kansas. And I like remembered when I set up the site, even SEO, which is like search engine optimization, was much easier back then. You could kind of hack the system if you went into the fields and put in like, Western belts, blingy Western belts, fashion belt, like all these things. And I remember a girl finding me from Kansas, and I like hadn't even told anybody or posted on Facebook. And I knew then, I was like, okay, this definitely has potential if someone from Kansas found me. And like, I haven't talked to hardly anybody about this. So that was really a big deal for me.
So how long was that into? How long did it take that person from Kansas to find you?
I wish I remembered. Maybe a month. It wasn't very long. I don't remember for sure, but it was pretty quick. And I was like, holy crap. And then I remember setting up a Facebook friend page because fan pages didn't even exist. I know that's like hard for some people to probably wrap their minds around. Instagram didn't exist. TikTok didn't exist. And so then I remembered like going and friending all of my like barrel racing friends, because there's hundreds of these girls that would go to these jackpots, so we like were all acquaintances. So I would go add them so they could see when I would post things. And then pretty soon I realized a lot of other people were adding me because the algorithm was amazing on Facebook at the time. And so I would study these people of like, I don't know this person. How did they find me? Or like, who are they? And realizing that like they weren't all cowgirls, and I was like, wow, if I carried some other things, I could probably sell to a lot bigger of an audience.
So what did that first kind of year look like? Is this all within that first year, the Facebook group? Is that what you called it? I think it's called the Facebook. I don't remember what it was.
Literally, I set it up like a person. Okay. There wasn't groups. There was nothing.
I can't even remember Facebook that long ago anymore. But no, so was this all in like the first year?
I was hustling because I still worked at the dairy. I mean, I was there from, I don't know, 6 to 7 for sure, maybe longer depending on the summer. But I was like and I was constantly, every dollar I made, I was reinvesting into inventory. And I was like, buying these hair on hide purses and belts and all of these things that I thought people would really like. And then I would add them to my group and try and keep adding more people and just like feeding the beast as much as possible. It was definitely fun. It was very much a challenge to like try and get that to grow.
So were you ever embarrassed or like, were you like worried what people were saying when you were like trying to add them all? You just knew it was in your heart and you were gonna, because I feel like that's something a lot of women struggle with, is like they have this idea or they want to, but they struggle with the courage behind it.
I think that was a gift that God gave me. I didn't ever care what people thought of me, like ever, kind of. It's honestly gotten harder as I've gotten older, and you have like this sort of image persona and you've been successful at some level that now you feel like you have to live up to something, even if you go to start something new. I think it's harder for me now. Then I had nothing to lose. No, I mean, I started a YouTube channel and it's like garbage when I go look back at it, but I loved it. I just did what was on my heart and had fun, So no, that was a blessing. I just did it.
So can you talk about the expansion? You said you started with belts and accessories basically, and then you kind of recognized that, to further serve other clientele, you could start expanding. Can you kind of go through what that expansion looked like, or what you started to do to really, I guess, like go to the next level essentially?
So yeah, and I think that's one thing I try and talk a lot about in business is it's okay if things shift. If you're like going a certain path and all of a sudden something sparks your interest, or you're like, oh, I hadn't even thought about this, but I think this could really work. It's okay to like test the waters, because had I not done that, I don't know like where it would be at all. And so, yeah, we were Western, but I wasn't scared to go in. I mean, it was a good timing, kind of like now where Western is very popular everywhere again, like even mainstream fashion. It was kind of similar at the time. So like sublimation shirts were really popular. And I think that's when I started noticing like, wow, a lot of these customers aren't necessarily Western, but they're buying these items. And so I was like, I wonder if I test some other things. And so there was vendors that I worked with that had dresses and different jewelry, and I would get it in. Maxi dresses were like just blowing up at the time. They were really, really popular. So I would carry those, and I would get one in and I would sell it out in 5 minutes. I mean, it was crazy. And so really quickly, I just started buying a lot more fast fashion clothing and researching, where do I find these vendors? Googling, because I didn't have money to like go to markets at the time or anything like that. I was working all the time. So the only person that I was concerned about was my dad, thinking that I was spending too much time on this and not working, which I tried to do in the evenings. But so that kind of, I was trying to make sure that he would have never like been like, yeah, you should go to a market. So it wasn't even a question. So I did a lot of research online to just find more vendors and keep testing different products of what my customer was buying.
So were you housing the stuff too, like shipping it yourself?
Oh yeah. In my basement. Yeah. I had a little house I rented, and everything was in the basement, and I would ship it all out, get the returns back in my house and everything.
I have some questions going into this kind of evolution. What was your strategy, kind of, if any, for, how did you grow? How did you find clothing? Just how were you doing these? You said Google, but like beyond that, I guess.
So growth strategy in the beginning, because I feel like you either have to start and scale a business, you either have to have money or time. I did not have money. So for me, it was time. And so I knew I was going to be putting in a lot of time. And so as we grew, literally for the first 3 years, and we can talk about this, but I put every dollar back into the company. I knew the more inventory I had, the more I could sell. Now, that is not always true if you don't already know that you're like, that it's already selling and you're already in the right market. Like I wouldn't recommend to someone to go start a boutique and just buy a bunch of inventory, because it will guarantee you will sell it. But I knew I was in a niche where like people weren't doing this. And I knew like if I can, no, it was new at the time and I was filling a need. There was a definite gap in the market. There was this need and people were buying it as fast as I could get my hands on it. So I'm like, I can scale. The fastest way to scale is to get more inventory as fast as possible. So I was constantly just pouring. At one point, I know I was putting some of my paycheck in it because I was trying to get as much inventory as possible. And that definitely helped me scale.
When we come back, how Laura did something a little unconventional and decided to shut down her website and pause her entire business.
As a producer, how many times have you been told you have a story to share? Go share it, but are left wondering exactly what that story is, exactly how to go about sharing it, and if it's even worth your time? Do we have an answer for you?
Elevate Ag is an online course and community where farmers, ranchers, and other producers can come together to access the tools and information they need to craft, share, and monetize their own personal ag story.
Our online course is unlike any out there. Sharing about agriculture has its unique challenges and opportunities, and until now, no course was addressing them. Elevate Ag was created by us, a rancher and a dairy farmer, specifically for you, our agriculture community.
Save time, frustration, and uncertainty by joining our online course and community. With the tools in this course, you're able to grow your business and monetize. To learn more about our course, visit our website, elevateyouragstory.com.
And then I did actually have a point where I got engaged in 2011 on like the day before Halloween. And so it was the end of the year and I kind of finished so I was really excited. I finished that year and then going into January was very like, man, this is getting to be a lot of work, which was great, but I wanted to plan a wedding. We didn't live together, so I knew I'd be moving. I was still on the farm full time. And I was like, man, I just don't want to do this right now. Like I was just, I just was not, it was too much. And I didn't want to like make a bad name for myself where like, say I wasn't getting back to people if they were sending me a return or answering emails fast enough. And so I was like, I need to just shut this down for a little bit because I can't do this well. And I don't like the last thing I wanted to do is have someone like go blast me on the internet, or like leave me a bad review because I didn't get to their email fast enough. It took me 2 days because it wasn't my top priority. So a crazy thing that I did was I shut down. I was not ready to commit to it. And so that year we got married in September. I just planned my wedding. I was on the farm and I literally quit. Like it's crazy, but I just quit. I had some inventory in my basement and I just left it. And then after we got married, I kind of said, okay, if I'm going to do this, when we moved, this is where I'm tying this in with the inventory in my basement. When we moved, I was like, I don't want to move this inventory to my basement. And we had a bookkeeper at my family farm. And she had this house that was a commercialized building. And she was like, hey, you can like rent half of it and put your inventory there because it's already commercialized space. And so I did that. And I was like, great, I'll have to move it into my house. But then I was like, okay, I'm going to be paying some rent. I have to make this work, or I have to like give this 100% and see what I can really do. So we relaunched in November of 2012 and I had a decent amount of inventory. And then it was like really game on, feed the beast. I hired some high school girls to come in and ship for me like in the evenings. And I would say so that was November. By April, I had my first full-time employee. I was still working full-time at the farm because I don't know. I didn't think it was going to be my life. I thought I was a farm girl, but I knew the potential wasn't there after I got married. It was in a C Corp with my dad's brother and there was no real future. I just didn't know what my future looked like at that point. So yeah, the scaling strategy, it wasn't to be really honest, when I was 23, it wasn't to like build a huge warehouse and this is my job. It was to make money.
So I'm curious, when you shut down your business, did you put anything on your website that was like BRB, like
Nope.
gonna get married? You just left everything at zero or?
I didn't do anything. I took the inventory off because at the time, like social media wasn't this huge thing. There wasn't like online shops everywhere. Like it was so different that it wasn't like a huge thing that I would have had to like announce, like I'm shutting down. I don't know. It was very different era, to be honest.
So then I guess my next question, and again, I know you're addressing this by saying it's like different era, but then when you were ready to sell again, did you just blast it back to the Facebook group and we're like, yep. I'm back again?
Back to the Facebook group. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think I remember doing something where I'm like, I got married and I'm ready to come back and do this more. But yeah, it was very much just, and I was really nervous to see like, okay, because by then Facebook had definitely started to have a little bit of an algorithm. And I was like, gosh, are people even going to come back? I was definitely nervous about that, but they did because at the time there still wasn't a lot out there. It was a very new market.
I have so many questions now. So as far as
then, like, business practice, okay, sorry.
I guess along that theme of like stopping. So now that you're like getting back up and going, what were some of the pitfalls and challenges that you encountered as you were growing?
People. As an entrepreneur, now that I've like been around enough people, I've like been to business conferences and realized that most entrepreneurs are not geared to be like a steady manager. Doesn't mean everybody, but they are geared to like drive a vision, build things, start things, and they need the other people to come in and like keep the people happy and like here's your plan of what you're going to do for the day, those type of things. I'm not that kind of person. So in the beginning, before I could afford a manager, that was something I really struggled with because I just came in and did stuff and I thought everyone else operated like that. I had no, we had like, I managed our Hispanics on the dairy, but it was very different because I just had to manage their schedule, and they just showed up and milked and left. And that was really, really challenging for me, really challenging going through trying to understand how to work with people, and not that everyone works like I do.
So when did you hire that manager then to help with that?
I just hired a girl that was already an employee, which was also not a great decision. It was just, she was there the longest. And then I think some of that for me was, I didn't go to business school. I didn't have business courses. I should have taken them. But learning that like, just because someone's been with you doesn't mean it's the right fit for them to be a manager. So yeah, a lot of hard knocks learning in the management of people for sure. And even as we grew, when I sold part of the company, we were at like, I think 67 employees, and it was still, I think that was probably the biggest thing that I've continually surprised by is the bigger we got, the more employees we had, the more accountable I felt to everyone. I had more on my plate, and not in a bad way. It definitely changed. It was a different amount of things, but it was like, now there's 60 people that their jobs rely on me to make sure that I'm running this ship in the right direction, and that I constantly have a tab on what's going on in the economy, in the market, all those things.
At what point did you end up leaving like your full-time job to make this your full-time job?
That is a great question and good insight from my husband. There was finally a conversation that happened. So 2000, let's see, my daughter was born 6/23/14. So 2013, I got pregnant. And then, so I relaunched in November of 2012. 2013, I got pregnant. And by, I want to say like January, she was due in June. And by like January, my husband was like, we farmed, and we did six figures that prior year. And he was like, so what are you going to do here? You are pregnant. You're still at your dad's dairy farm, and you're running this business, and we have a farm. Like, Laura, I love you, but you have to make some decisions. So he's very good he's always just been a cheerleader and like sits back and lets me run. But he's also my like reality check sometimes of like, you have to make some decisions. You can't do everything. And so that was really hard for me. I think it was more of a personal relationship thing with my dad that was very, very hard for me to let go of. But it's funny, in hindsight, it was so good for our relationship.
So here we are. So were you still in renting the space then, and when you had stepped away?
No, we had already moved to a different space in town. It was a small little town of like 700 people, but it was like on Main Street, and it was a little more of like an actual shop setting. By the time I was pregnant, I think we moved 4 times down in that same little town. There was shops that were like bigger, and I kept running out of space. So when I was, the last space we were in that was probably like 3,000 square feet. We moved there when I was, I don't know, maybe April, and I had my daughter in June. We moved to our first real warehouse in like July because we were so out of space, and that was 9,000 square feet.
And is that the one you built yourself, or no?
The warehouse we built is 20,000, and I built that 4 years ago now, 3.5.
Gosh, so much has happened in 10 years for you.
My one piece of advice is please take pictures along the way. I wish I would have taken more pictures to document. Do you know what I mean? Like to document, like when we were in this little tiny space and had 1,000 orders laid out, and all these girls were standing trying to ship it on this little table. And, we didn't have real shipping stations and stuff like that. I wish I had 1,000 more of those kind of pictures, because it's just cool to look back on.
Was there ever a point you wanted to stop where you're like, I'm shutting this down again? I am ending the website again like I did before.
No, there was a lot of challenges. 2016, the algorithm changed a ton, and it was kind of like this era where a lot of boutiques had popped up. And so the market was getting a little more saturated, and then Facebook came in and massively changed the algorithm, which is basically like how much they're going to show you to people. And up till that point, we were all organic. I had never paid for ads. It's just how we ran the company. And so really quickly, our sales went down, and I'd also like been trying to hire and train people to do the photography. And at the time, I didn't know that when you are the only person running your brand, when you are the buyer, the photographer, the merchandiser, everything has a certain style. And if you don't have that wrote out and you try and bring people in to take that over, it's going to change. It's going to look different. because they don't know what the brand is. And so I was struggling with some of those things. And then the algorithm went down at the same, like moved at this changed at the same time. And then I had a really bad management situation, toxic work environment. I had to let go of a bunch of people. It was terrible. Literally like a couple of weeks after I had my son. And so we were really, I've never taken out a loan. It was the first time I thought, do I have to go take out a loan for this business? Like, what is happening? And I remember talking to Zach and I was like, I don't know if this is going to make it. And he was like, well, you can say it was a hell of a run. Like this is just part of whatever the journey is for your life. And I was just so like prideful and not ready to like give this. I think it was more pride at that point because we had had some success and I was like, I'm not going to let this fail. And so finally, I so vividly remember I ran on my gravel road and I was bawling and I was like, okay, Lord, if this is your plan for my life, I'm giving this to you. And your plan is better than mine. And I know that. And I'm going to trust that. And I'm going to do everything in my power to make this work. I'm going to go back. I'm going to dig in the weeds. I will do everything. I will post the Facebook posts and I will take the photos. If it doesn't work, I will know this is not your plan, but I'm going to give it my all. So that was my plan. And I think when I like let that go, there was such a relief of like, so it wasn't like I was just waiting for God to like come do a miracle. I still had to go back and rebuild, but I also had this sense of if this is not where he wants me, he is not going to lead me here. And so, yeah, I went back in and I had a couple people that were really, really good and stayed with me. And we just dug in and picked up the pieces. And I would say within a year, we were back up to, I don't remember the numbers, to be honest with you. I'd have to go like look at tax returns. But we were doing really well. I don't know. We probably had another, 8 employees like a year later, and we're kind of getting in a really good rhythm again.
So looking back, you mentioned that you wish you had taken more pictures, remember things, but what are some of the big moments you do remember that you remember celebrating that were, you talked about the warehouse you built, like what are those big moments to you growing this business?
I do have some really fond memories of Charlie, my first daughter, being 1 week old. I stayed home for a week, and then 1 week old, taking her to the warehouse and like having her lay on boxes while I was like opening stuff and just thinking like how cool it was that I got to take my daughter with me. I didn't have to like be on a maternity leave and then leave her with someone. Like I was so grateful for that. So I had some really cool memories because she came with me everywhere. She went to markets with me. Most of my kids have when they're babies. But like just, so that was really important to me. Building the warehouse was a big one. That was really cool. Just getting to a point where we bought the ground, we rezoned it. It was the exact location that I had wanted so bad. And we had to work for it. Like nothing was easy. Nothing came easy. Nothing about getting the land was really easy. Nothing about getting the building done was easy, but it just made it so much more worth it. Every time that these things have happened, like these road bumps, like 2016, that changed me. Like I learned that like you cannot be complacent as a business owner ever, and that things are always changing and you have to be willing to evolve. And no matter what size you are, you have to, if you necessary, you need to have a thumb on things and be willing to jump back in at any time and take over something. So anyway, I kind of sidetracked, but that was a big moment for me. The building the warehouse was really cool. The warehouse we were at before, we took over an old flea market. It was the actual back where the inventory and the girls shipped. There was no windows. It was really dark and just like not great. And so I was really proud that we had a place where people would be really excited and proud to work versus trying to hire people out in this crappy warehouse.
So you had touched on this a little bit earlier, and I didn't want to carry on because I wanted to come up now. But I would say probably after building the warehouse, the next really big thing for your business was bringing in outside
capital. Yep, investors.
Yeah, capital. Yeah. So do you want to talk about that, like when that happened and that journey for you?
Yeah. So October of 2020, time goes really fast. So it's been about a year and a half. I was able to bring on an investor group, and they had approached me, and it was about a year process. And when I was originally approached, I was like, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, why would I ever do that? What would possess a person to do that? And it's just funny how I think God works on you in the right ways. I was like, this should be fun. I'm willing to entertain this process and see what they tell me about my company. It wasn't going to cost me anything. And so it was a long process, and then COVID hit. So that kind of slowed things down and really gave me the ability to say, I had to reevaluate a lot of things. COVID, we had a lot of growth, but it was really hard and there was a lot more challenges. I felt like there was a lot more risk just with everything going on with health and people, how they felt, and just so many things that I was like, I just kept feeling this nudge of like, this is it. This is your time to not have 100% of the risk. And so, yeah, we talked about it. I kind of when COVID hit was like, we got to everybody put the brakes on a little bit. And then later summer came back around to the idea and just felt like it was my time. And so that to date, I mean, clearly anytime there's an exit at any extent, I think it's a very, everyone says that's what you do it for, to have something that like, okay, I built something, and it's to get to a point where someone else wanted to pay me money for my business was kind of mind-blowing, like phenomenally mind-blowing. But with that, I think if anyone that's listening to this ever gets to that point, you have to make sure you really weigh in, is this what I really want, and why? What are the reasons why? For me, I had spent a lot of time, my kids were not secondary, but they always were at work, and it was always on my brain. And so I was ready to have a new season where I could focus on other things and know that my business was still really well taken care of. I could still be creative. I could still do the buying, still be very much a part of the process. I think the people you're selling to really, really is a huge part of something. And they were really good people. I had got to vet them and talk to other people that they'd worked with. So that was, I think it was super humbling, to be really honest, to get to the point where it's like, I mean, essentially my grandkids are going to be taken care of. It's just it's really weird, but really humbling. And I think it's put me in a place where I'm like, again, challenged because things are different in a good way. And like, okay, God, you have given me everything that more than I could ever need, honestly. Like, and so what is next? What do you want from me? Because you've clearly granted me every desire of my business heart of wanting to be successful and know that my family and my legacy of that is taken care of.
What would you say you're the most proud of with Shop Filly Flair?
It's a really good question. I am most proud of the brand as itself and one particular relationship that I have there. Clara is my ride or die, and she has stuck with me through thick and thin, and she's like a sister to me. And I'm really proud of what she has accomplished, and not only that, but like what we have become as like friends. And it's like what you guys are doing. It's more fun to do things with somebody. And I'm really proud that somehow through my crazy, she's still stuck with me.
So as we wrap things up here, we'll ask you what we kind of ask everyone. What is your biggest lesson learned or your best grace that you've received?
So my biggest lesson learned is, I've learned this lesson many times in my business, but if you have a gut feeling about something and you know that there's a certain thing or a certain way you want to take your business, don't let anybody else try and change your mind. It doesn't matter their credentials. It doesn't matter their college degree or how old they are. If you feel in your gut that like this is going to do something, don't try and let someone else deter you from that or try and have you navigate or change the course of where you want to take things just because they have been around longer or know more than you do. And my biggest grace is hands down, like, I think God humbling me of how many times I've messed up. Business is not easy. You're going to have bad relationships go bad sometimes. I've lost money. I've almost lost the business in 2016. I felt like I did. And I think the grace to be able to rebound from those things is so humbling.
Nowadays, you'll find Laura spending her time on her family farm while raising her family of 5. She says she is excited to see Filly Flair continue to grow as a brand and looks forward to helping it reach a huge monetary goal marker this year. But even more so, Laura said she's excited to start a new chapter, one where Shop Filly Flair isn't consuming her efforts 100% of the time, and one where she can listen to a new calling on her heart to encourage other moms in business and fill her cup as well as others.
One final thing before we go, we want to announce the winner of our giveaway. So this winner is going to receive a one-on-one coaching call with Natalie and I to mastermind and excel their business forward. And the winner is Jessie from @beyond_the fence line. So congratulations to Jessie. And thank you to everyone who shared about our podcast, your stories, and shared all of your testimonials. We are so excited to start this new journey of being able to serve and engage with you, all things business. So thank you. Thanks so much for listening to the show this week. If you loved today's episode, we would appreciate it if you would subscribe and left us a review. Let us know what you enjoyed, what your big takeaways were, and who you'd like to hear from next. If you're active online, we'd also love it if you took a screenshot and shared today's episode to your social pages too, encouraging friends and family to give it a listen.
You can find more about Elevate the Podcast on our online course at our website, elevateyouragstory.com. And if you want, follow along with us on our personal pages @Natalie Kovarik and @Tara Vanderdusen. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next week.